There's a new brand of suspension on the market, and that is called RFLOXA.
We got it next. That's how you finesse. We come for they next. We come to collect.
Now, before I get into riding and reviewing the suspension, there's a couple of things that I want to make clear. This is not my first time riding the suspension. I've spent upwards of 5 to 10 hours breaking in the suspension and getting it ready for this review. I think that's a very important thing to do because you need to make sure that the bike is actually well balanced. You need to make sure you've got the right spring rates for your weight. And a very telltale sign on whether or not you have the right spring rate is if you can feel the compression and rebound adjustments while you're making them. Now, I'm not saying you make one click and you can immediately feel it, but I am saying if you move it 3 or 4 clicks, you should be able to notice quite a bit of a difference. If you can't notice that difference, chances are your spring rate is wrong. Another telltale sign that you've got the correct spring rate is that your bike is at the proper sag zone. Now, on all bikes across the industry, that sag zone should be within 30%. Now, there's a lot of different aspects that go into making sure that the bike is balanced, but a lot of that comes down to the feel and your personal riding style. Where you put your weight on the bike makes a huge difference in how the bike behaves, but for the most part, you want to try to stay neutral on it. If you can stay within the neutral zone, then you're going to start to notice things that really make the bike perform a certain way. Like, if your front end is tucking, chances are your rear end might be a little bit too high. And vice versa, if your front end is washing, then your rear end might be a little bit too low. There's a lot of different aspects that go into this. It comes down to how well the bike tracks, comes down to when you're on the power, how the bike squats. There's a lot of different things when it comes to balancing a bike. So a lot of this you have to really learn, and you have to get a good feel for the bike to understand how it behaves, and suspension is a crucial part to making that work for you. My suspension setup is definitely not going to be the same as somebody else's because I ride totally different. So if you're watching a review on suspension, you should probably make sure that they have taken the proper time to set the bike up for themselves, because that's going to go a long way in how the bike actually feels underneath them, and that way they can give you a solid opinion on what's going on. Now, the front fork that I will be testing today is the FCG31RVP. Now, this fork comes in quite a few different variations, but the one I'll be testing today is a 228mm travel 55-pound spring rate. This fork looks a lot like a Fast Ace, but it does have some nice features to it that kind of set it apart. One of which is the triple clamps. This is probably the most noticeable feature. They've got a 3-bolt system on the lower and a 2-bolt on the upper to add some additional strength and rigidity to the overall chassis. On the top here, you've got a preload adjustment, which is really nice for helping balance out the bike. You've got a rebound adjustment, and then on the lower, you've got both high and low speed compression. On the rear end, I've got the RAB53RV. This shock has got a lot of features to it as well. Comes in multiple spring rates for your weight. It also has high and low speed compression and rebound, so it's nice that they added in that additional adjustability to the rear shock. Now, this is considerably a very budget-friendly setup. The front end comes in at $899. It is not going to compare to what's premium on the market. However, for these lightweight bikes that really ultimately aren't that fast, this is a great setup to make you comfortable. Oh, it's pretty windy, so hopefully the wind isn't too bad for you, but let's go ahead and get into riding it. So like I've said, I've had some time on this suspension prior to this ride, just trying to get it to break in. What I will say is the support that this suspension provides is definitely there. Like, you're definitely riding in a good portion of the stroke throughout the whole thing. But I would say this is much better suspension, at least this fork, for doing jumps, because when you come off of things like that, it absorbs the hit really nicely and it ramps up well. But all of the small chatter on these rocks is a little bit, so, you know, it's just chattery. Like, you definitely feel that chatter underneath it. It's not like a cloud, and that comes down to, I think, the dampening characteristics of it. It's good, it's not terrible, but it feels a little bit over dampened for the square edge hits. But the rear shock tracks quite well for the price point.
And it's nice that you can actually hear the suspension rebound and dampening working underneath you. Like, I can physically hear the noises that it's making while I'm riding. Like I said, it feels really supportive and great for jumping, coming up short on rollers like that. But for traditional trail riding, which is the majority of what this is, like high-paced desert trail riding, it's just really quite chattery. Like, it's hard to fine-tune that. And so when I try to produce harmony between the compression and the rebound, it takes some time to try to really fine-tune and achieve that. But once you got it, it is really comfortable and really easy to predict and manage. I'm just wicked right now, as fast as this little light beat can go. Nice that it has the support to go crashing through rollers like that, and it doesn't get out of hand. It doesn't start kicking side to side. I'm really interested to know what the longevity of this shock would be. Made out of cheaper components. I want to really stress test and abuse it and see truly how long it lasts for me. It keeps the dampening characteristics that it currently has. So let's talk a little bit about suspension that comes on the majority of these bikes stock. It is very, very cheap, and in my opinion, garbage. It's hard to find a bike that comes from China that's got suspension really worth riding. And so to sit here and say that, you know, this Chinese fork and shock combo is going to be any better is a tough call to make, because you're looking at it and you're like, well, it looks the same on the outside, you know, aside from this one having good looking triple clamps. This combo actually rides way better than I think what you would expect it to. And a lot of that's because it feels like it's designed for an adult much better. Like, I can actually go out there, have my weight supported throughout most of this riding. Now, I wish I could fine tune it better. I spent a lot of time adjusting the clickers, trying to find a good harmony between the compression and the rebound. I haven't really been able to find that yet. It's been a lot of time, but with that being said, for stock and for the price point, it feels quite good. Like, it just feels strong, actually. Feels like it can take a hit. Like, I'm not worried about crashing into these rollers because I know what to predict. I'm able to like really hop through, pick my lines, manual rollers, and have the support, have it not be overly reactive to certain scenarios. And a lot of that also comes down to making sure that I had the right spring ratios and setups in this thing, because I can actually feel the dampening work throughout the stroke. Now, if we were to be talking about the difference between premium suspension and budget, I think the biggest things that I would say make up such a difference is the broad range that comes with premium suspension. With budget suspension, you're kind of, you know, it's like it's good and it works well in certain areas, but it's really not that adaptable. Like right now, in all this chatter, I definitely have to like control it. Whereas premium suspension, the bike just works so well. And it works so fluidly underneath you that you just really have the confidence that comes with the dampening characteristics of premium suspension. The term broad, I think, is what I would use to describe what top of the line suspension feels like. You can take it really anywhere and you know that you're going to be okay. Whereas like there's certain things that I question going into, like if I were to go hit a big jump right now, oh, would it hold up? Would it be okay to get me through that? If I were to go and hit whoops really fast, is it going to stay straight? Is it going to be predictable? If I were to go hit chatter, am I going to have my hand stay on the bike? These are all things that when it comes to premium suspension, you don't have to question. You can just have that confidence behind, especially once you get it set up. And beyond that point, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because setting it up is easier, but there's so much that you can do to get it set up that you're like, am I really getting the maximum potential out of this stuff? You know? Like, that's a really tough thing to say unless you are truly in tune and have had a lot of time on the suspension. Whereas something like this, you know, you can quite easily tell when you've got it to a point that you just don't think it's going to get any better. And that's okay. This isn't bad suspension at all. And it's really wallet friendly, which is really nice. Now this Surron Libby that I'm on definitely is not the fastest little bike in the world. And with speed comes much more reaction out of your suspension, where you really need to have some confidence. But I do think that, like, if you were on a faster bike like an E-Ride Pro, you'd be pretty confident with the suspension. Now the one thing I will say is the linkage progression on a bike like an E-Ride Pro, very, very different. So you actually want to spring down a bit. Like right now I'm on a 550. I would definitely be on a 450 on an E-Ride. And a 550 on this bike is even a little bit on the heavy end for my body weight. Right now, fully geared up, I'm about 180. But it still works quite well. But if I was on an E-Ride Pro, 100% I'd be on a 450 at my body weight. Now this suspension might not be quite premium, but I am really glad to see these companies really up in their game. I'm really glad to see that you're able to get pretty good suspension at a really good price point, keeping these bikes in the cheaper range.
Well, I gotta say, after a couple of solid days of testing this suspension, I'm really impressed with how it performed, especially at the price point that it's at. Being budget suspension, you never really know what you're gonna get out of it until you're on it and testing, and this suspension actually felt really solid. I think something that I'm really impressed by is the rear shock. I was really surprised that I liked it as much as I did, especially being as cheap as it is. That's one of the cheaper options on the market. You basically got, you know, your $150 fast ace shock, then it steps up to this shock at about $250-ish. Then you've got a Von Cat, about $600, then you've got the EXT Arma. Now, does this compare to an EXT Arma? No, it's not at that level. That shock's insane. Even the Von Cat is a really great option, but for what this is and the price point that it was at, performs way better than stock suspension and performs way better than that cheaper fast ace shock. So all in all, the shock really impressed by. The front fork felt very similar to a fast ace. That's okay. The fast ace feels really good, really strong. I do like that this fork has got a floating axle and the triple clamps on it are really good. The actual chassis of it is pretty stiff. The whole bike felt like it functioned quite well, and to have 4 different adjustments just right there in the clickers is really nice. High and low speed compression, rebound, and a preload adjustment. Makes it easy to really balance out the bike and fine tune it to what you want to do. We really appreciate you guys watching our videos. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to hit subscribe. It goes a long way in allowing us to make videos for you. If there's any future videos you guys would like to see or questions that you have, please let us know in the comments. We definitely like to hear from you guys. But thank you for watching this review on our RFLOXA suspension.